Tie a ribbon on the old oak tree. In America, in 1971, a young man in a remote mountain town was sentenced to prison. The police proved his guilt, and he was given 3 years, a time they deemed sufficient for him to amend his ways. However, Mary, his fiancée, didn't believe it. On the day of the trial, despite his constant glances back, she was nowhere to be seen. Before being taken away in the prison van, the young man asked someone to pass a letter to Mary, and then he left immediately. He couldn't see her hidden behind, crying and clutching a piece of paper with a few brief lines. "I know I don't deserve your love. I also have no hope that you still love me after all this. But if you can forgive me, please tie a yellow ribbon on the only old oak tree in the town square on the day I return. And if there's no ribbon, I will leave forever and never bother you again." During his 3 years in prison, despite his hopes, Mary vanished without a trace. In the first year, he thought perhaps she was still adjusting to the idea that her soon-to-be husband was a criminal. In the second year, he sent people to inquire about her and heard rumors that she had gone far away, with no idea when she would return. By the end of his sentence, he no longer thought about the yellow ribbon, much less about the girl he loved. On his release day, he decided to take a bus directly to the city instead of passing through the town square as they had planned. One bus came and went, then another, and he did not get on. Only when the last bus passed did he slowly walk towards the town square. His mind told him to go the other way, but his heart led him forward. That afternoon, the townspeople at the square were amazed to see a young man weeping under a brilliantly yellow oak tree adorned with hundreds of ribbons. 2. Waiting for the rabbit named Love. Every day I sit under a large tree, waiting for a rabbit named Love. I heard someone saw it run by here once. The tree keeps growing taller, its branches spreading wide, but my wish remains the same. One day, a deer named Innocence passed by, and we chatted for a while. After it left, a dove named Joy flew by. We danced and sang together before it flew off into the blue sky. A dog named Loyalty came by next. We played chess, and then it too went on its way. Also, a sparrow named Romance, a fox named Enchantment, and an antelope named Gentleness visited. We all had pleasant conversations before they departed. I kept waiting for the rabbit, but it never seemed to appear. Finally, a squirrel named Hope brought me news about the rabbit Love. It said, "Love has passed by here many times." I replied, "That can't be true. I've been waiting right here." The squirrel explained that while I was talking to Innocence, Joy, Loyalty, Romance, Enchantment, and Gentleness, Love was also right beside me, but I never noticed it. 3. The garbage truck rule. One day, I hopped into a taxi to head to the airport. We were driving in the right lane when suddenly a black SUV sped out of a parking lot ahead of us. The taxi driver slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. The driver of the SUV turned and shouted at us, but the taxi driver just smiled and waved. I thought he was really kind. So I asked him, "Why are you so calm? That guy almost wrecked your car and we could have been hospitalized." Then the taxi driver taught me something I now call the garbage truck rule. He explained that many people are like garbage trucks. They go around filled with trash, frustration, anger, and disappointment. Because they're overflowing with trash, they need a place to dump it, and sometimes that's on you. Don't take it personally. Just smile, wave, wish them well, and move on. Don't pick up their garbage and spread it to others at work, on the streets, or at home. Successful people do not let garbage trucks ruin their day. Life is too short to live with regrets, so love those who treat you well and pray for those who don't. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it. 4. The unexpected wisdom of love and forgetfulness. In a creative writing class taught by a professor, where young writers were gathered, the professor paused during a lecture on novels and asked the students, "What is the opposite of love?" "Hate," one student quickly replied. The professor paced back and forth, deep in thought, then set down his lecture notes on the table and said, "Let's consider this scenario. Imagine you are in love and then you break up. 50 years later, when you're 70, you accidentally run into your ex on a stroll one afternoon. She looks at you intently and says, 'Mr. A, I hate you.' If that happens, you should actually feel lucky." "Why is that?" asked the student, puzzled. "Because you're fortunate to have someone who has hated you for half a century." "Lucky? That makes no sense," another student protested. "Calm down. Think about it," the professor continued. "Hate also involves strong emotions, just like love and affection. It means someone has been thinking about you for 50 years. That's quite rare. Aren't you lucky then? The real fear should be when you meet your ex again and ask, 'Miss B, do you remember me?' And she stares blankly at you and says, 'Excuse me, sir, you look somewhat familiar. Who are you?'" The class burst into laughter, finding the imagined scenario amusing yet a bit awkward. The professor concluded, "The opposite of love isn't hate." The class agreed with the professor. The opposite of love is forgetfulness. The best way to get back at someone is to forget them and move on. 5. The Sword of King Dionysius. A long time ago, Dionysius ruled over Syracuse, the wealthiest region in the kingdom of Sicily. Dionysius lived in a grand palace filled with expensive items and many servants. His power and wealth made many people in Syracuse jealous, and one of them was Damocles, a trusted advisor to Dionysius. He often complained to the king, "You're so lucky. You have everything others could only wish for. You must be the happiest person in the world." Dionysius grew tired of hearing this every day. One day the king said to his advisor, "Why do you always think I'm happier than everyone else?" "But it's true, my king," Damocles replied. "Look at the power and riches you hold. You never have to worry or stress about anything. Can life get any better?" "Well then, I'll let you take my place for a day." "Oh, I never dared dream of such a thing," exclaimed Damocles, overjoyed. "Just to be in your position for one day would be the greatest happiness for me." "All right, come here tomorrow, and you will have that happiness." The next day, Damocles was brought to the palace. As ordered by Dionysius, the servants treated Damocles as they would their own king. They dressed him in royal robes and placed the king's crown on his head. Damocles sat down at the large dining table, and a feast of delicious foods was served. For Damocles, there was no greater joy. Rare wines, fragrant flowers, fine oils, and lively music were all brought to him. Damocles relaxed on a soft cushion, enjoying boundless happiness. "This is truly living," he sighed to Dionysius, who was sitting across the table. "I've never experienced such a wonderful life before." As he lifted a cup of wine to his lips and looked up at the ceiling, what was that swinging above and pointing straight at his head? Damocles froze, his smile faded, his face turned pale, and his hands shook. At that moment, he no longer cared for the fine foods or music. The only thing he thought about was getting out of that seat as fast as possible. Above Damocles' head hung a sharp sword, suspended by a thin thread, pointing right at the top of his head. Suddenly Damocles tried to jump from his seat and flee, but he immediately abandoned the idea, fearing that even a small movement might break the thread and cause the sword to fall. Damocles sat still as a statue. "What's the matter?" Dionysius asked. "You seem tense." "The sword! The sword above there," Damocles whispered. "Do you see it?" "Of course I do," Dionysius replied. "I see it every day. It's always hanging over my head and could fall at any moment. But it's just a part of what I set up to remind myself of other potential dangers like betrayal by advisors, the disloyalty of the people, invasions by enemies, or my own poor decisions. To hold power, you must first learn to accept all dangers and risks, do you understand? Yes, my king. I've truly understood that now, Damocles answered. I didn't realize you had to worry about so much. Please take back your position, and I will go home. From then on, Damocles never again wished to trade places with the king, not even for a second. Try putting yourself in someone else's shoes to see why they do what they do before getting upset with them.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
6. A valuable lesson. Once upon a time, there was a brilliant painter named Ranga. Throughout his artistic career, he created many amazing masterpieces that amazed everyone. As Ranga got older, he started to reflect on his life. He decided to open an art class to teach others and to find a student to carry on his legacy. He often told his students, "You will only succeed if you satisfy me with your skills and understanding." Therefore, Ranga rarely praised anyone and didn't specify when the course would end. He dedicated himself to teaching his students unique ways to evaluate and estimate. Ranga never exaggerated the importance of paintings or fame. Instead, he emphasized how students should conduct themselves and their attitude towards life. Among his many students, Rajiv was the most talented, hard-working, and creative, quickly surpassing his peers. Ranga was very pleased with him. One day, Ranga called Rajiv and said, "I am proud of the progress you've made, but before I truly recognize you as a talented painter, I want you to create a painting that everyone will find beautiful and praise." Rajiv agreed, worked tirelessly day and night, and presented a magnificent painting to Ranga. Ranga suggested, "Take this painting and place it in the main square. Write a note underneath inviting anyone to point out any flaws by marking an X on them." Rajiv did as instructed. 2 days later, Ranga asked Rajiv to retrieve the painting. Rajiv was disappointed to find his painting covered in X marks. Ranga smiled reassuringly and encouraged Rajiv not to be disheartened but to try again. Rajiv painted another masterpiece and showed it to Ranga. This time, Ranga advised, change the message under the painting. Place paint and brushes next to it in the square and ask people to correct any errors they find using these tools. After 2 days, Rajiv was thrilled to see that no one had altered his painting, and he confidently brought it back to his teacher. Ranga said, "You have succeeded today. Because being skilled in art isn't enough. You must also understand that people often make careless judgments at the first opportunity, even if they know nothing about it. If you always let the world judge you, you will always fail. People enjoy critiquing others without thinking about the responsibility or seriousness of it. They marked X's on your first painting because it was a thoughtless task they enjoyed. But when asked to fix the errors, no one did, fearing to reveal their lack of knowledge. So, don't let others' opinions easily sway you. Evaluate yourself. And of course, never judge others too quickly. Adopt a different lifestyle. Live for yourself and care about what you truly want in life. Consider good advice, but don't bother about the rest. 7. Subject. Letter to you, the self-conscious girl. Dear, you often feel insecure because you don't think you're beautiful. I don't need a woman who is just outwardly beautiful. I seek one with a beautiful heart and soul. Your eyes seem sadly sunny. To me, they shine like a brilliant dawn. Your hands are rough and calloused. In them, I feel the warmth of a wonderful wife and mother. I'm tall and you're not. Good, if the sky ever falls, at least I can use my height to shelter you. You cry often. Your tears are so kind they could end a drought. You think you cause trouble. It helps me practice the patience and forgiveness I've only known in theory before. My dear, even though you're not perfect, I love you, love everything about you. To me, you are a brave woman who accepts love, strong enough to forgive, and generous enough to share your joy with me and others. If you were perfect, you might not know what it is to dream, to hope. You wouldn't need to strive to nurture a better tomorrow. You would never know the joy of being loved or understand your desires and longings. Letter to you, the self-conscious girl. 8. Open your heart. A young black boy is playing on the grass. Across the street, a man is gently releasing colorful balloons into the sky. Blue, red, purple, yellow, and even black. The boy, excited, runs over to the man and asks softly, "Sir, can the black balloons fly as high as the others?" The man turns around, quickly wiping away tears that were about to fall, and points to the tiny dots that the balloons have become in the sky. He answers the boy, "Yes, the black balloons can fly just as high as the others, and so can you." The boy smiles broadly, thanking the man. Black, yellow, red, no matter the color, they are all just balloons. 9. Black or white. When I was in elementary school, I got into a heated argument with a friend. I don't actually remember what we were arguing about, but I've never forgotten the lesson I learned that day. As we argued, I insisted, "I'm right, you're wrong." And my friend stubbornly claimed, "No, you're wrong, I'm right." Our teacher caught us and took us to the teacher's room. She asked us to sit on opposite sides of a table with a large plastic ball on it. The ball was jet black, but when the teacher asked, "What color is the ball?" my friend said, "It's white." I was baffled. Was he blind or just playing a trick on me? Frustrated, I blurted out, "It's black, you fool!" The argument about the ball's color resumed. Eventually, our teacher had us switch places. Now, from my new position, when asked again, I had to admit, "It's white." The ball was painted 2 different colors on each side. From my original spot, it was black, and from my friend's, it was white. And here we were, arguing fiercely because we were both certain we were right without understanding why the other disagreed. Never assume you're completely right. To truly understand others, you must consider their perspective and circumstances. It's the only way to fully grasp their point of view. 10. Tumbling around. When I first learned to walk, falling down was inevitable. Each time I fell, I'd often lie on the floor, waiting for my mom to come comfort me or give me a treat before I'd agree to get up. Once I had a particularly painful fall, and despite my mom's soothing, I couldn't stop crying. This time, it wasn't just for attention. I was really hurt. Suddenly, my mom stood up, opened a small cabinet where she kept miscellaneous items, and brought out a tumbler toy. She placed the tumbler toy on the ground, pushed it so it wobbled and fell, and then told me, "Look, the tumbler might be smaller than you, but every time it's knocked down, it stands right back up, just like my beloved daughter should." I watched the tumbler toy. Indeed, whenever it was pushed down, it bounced right back up. I was entertained by the new toy and forgot about the pain. My mom looked at me with a gentle smile and said, "See, no matter what, the tumbler stands up again. It's very brave, and I believe my daughter is just as brave." I stopped crying and stared wide-eyed at the tumbler toy, which kept swaying but never fell down. From that day, I tried to be like the tumbler toy. Every time I fell, I tried to get right back up. My mom would often call me her lovely little tumbler girl. Now, my mom isn't beside me. I've grown up and have to take care of everything myself. Life isn't always as I wish. Sometimes, when I'm tired and discouraged, I want to give up everything. But the image of the tumbler toy and my mom's encouraging words always come back to me. And I get back up again. Nothing can knock me down because I'm determined to be like that tumbler toy. 11. The Golden Window. Charles lives with his parents on a small farm. Every day, he wakes up before the sun rises. He loves watching the early morning, especially the golden window of a nearby farm. To Charles, that window is the most beautiful in the world. From a distance, it looks splendid, as if it's made of gold. The house's paint also looks luxurious. Surely it must belong to a wealthy family. He imagines a brand new, fragrant curtain inside, not old like the ones at his house. And what else? A fireplace, of course. Right next to it would be a soft, cushioned chair, the perfect spot that Charles has longed for. He lets his imagination soar. Then one day, Charles decides to see this dream house for himself. As he gets closer, his excitement grows, but everything turns out to be the opposite of what he imagined. The house is just an ordinary one, with even the golden paint around the window looking scratched and worn. Deeply disappointed, Charles doesn't notice a boy playing in the yard until he calls out, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just walking around," Charles replies awkwardly. "Where are you from?" "Over there," Charles gestures vaguely. The boy looks curious and pulls Charles aside to ask, "Hey, do you know the house over there?" Pointing in the direction the boy indicates, Charles is surprised to see it's his own house. It looks beautiful from a distance under the sunlight. The boy excitedly says, "See, that house with the golden window, it must be beautiful inside, right? They probably have a big fireplace and a comfy armchair next to it." 12. The Two Magic Boxes. A Tale of Joy and Sorrow. Once upon a time, a poor grandfather and his grandson lived in a small hut, struggling just to have enough to eat and wear. The boy often felt sad because he didn't have nice clothes like the other kids in the village, who would tease him. Especially at Christmas, he never had a Christmas tree or any gifts in their hut. On his 10th Christmas, just like every other year, he had no expectations of anything good happening. However, his kind grandfather gave him 2 boxes as a gift, one black box and one wrapped in shiny gold paper. The boxes were placed next to each other on top of a cabinet. The grandfather said, "When you're sad, sit next to the black box, and when you're happy, sit beside the gold one." Although the boxes were empty, they brought the boy some comfort during Christmas. He followed his grandfather's instructions, putting all his sorrows and joys into the 2 boxes. He felt happier talking beside the gold box, as if his joy was multiplied and lingered. When he was sad and talked to the black box, his sadness seemed to lessen. The 2 boxes helped alleviate his feelings of loneliness and frustration. Out of curiosity, the boy eventually opened both boxes to look inside. At the bottom of the black box, he noticed a hole. "Grandpa, where have all my sorrows gone?" the boy asked. "They've fallen out and flown away," his grandfather replied. Then he continued, "The gold box doesn't have a hole, so it keeps all your joy and good luck with you forever. Have you found your own special boxes yet?" 13. Freckles. An old woman was holding hands with a little boy standing in line at the park. The boy's face was covered in small freckles, but his eyes shone with excitement. Many other children were also in line, waiting for an artist to paint their faces to look like Native Americans or aliens. "You have so many freckles, there's no space left on your face to paint," a girl standing behind the boy exclaimed loudly. Embarrassed, the boy looked down. Seeing this, his grandmother sat down next to him. "Why are you sad? I love your freckles. When I was young, I always wished I had freckles," the grandmother said as she gently stroked the boy's cheek with her wrinkled fingers. "Freckles are beautiful. I'm sure the artist will love your freckles too." The boy smiled. "Really, Grandma?" "Absolutely," the grandmother replied. "Now try to find something prettier than your freckles." The boy looked at his grandmother, thought for a moment, and then whispered, "Your wrinkles, Grandma."
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
14. Climbing the Stairs of Life. Lessons from a Journey to the 80th Floor. Two brothers lived on the 80th floor of a skyscraper. One day, when returning from work, they found the elevator broken, forcing them to climb the stairs to their apartment. Although slightly tired by the 20th floor, the most annoying part was the bags they were carrying. They decided to leave them behind and retrieve them the next day. Feeling lighter and happier, they eagerly reached the 40th floor. However, the younger brother began to feel weak in his knees, and the two started arguing over a minor issue. Still, they managed to climb another 20 floors. Upon seeing the sign for the 60th floor, they were both relieved, knowing they were close to their destination. Their mood improved and they stopped arguing, making the rest of the journey more bearable. Step by step, they finally reached their home. Overjoyed, they soon realized that the apartment keys were in the bags they left on the 20th floor. Our lives are quite similar. Everyone has to climb their own stairs in life. Some reach the 80th floor, others less. Initially, we grow up under pressure from parents, teachers, and peers, often unable to do what we truly desire. In our youth, we dream big, but achieving these dreams requires sweat, learning, and sometimes sacrifices. In our 20s, thrilled with newfound freedom, we often feel burdened by our past dreams and wish to abandon them to pursue fleeting desires and enjoy life's brief joys. By our 40s, we might feel unsatisfied, prone to complaining and criticizing others. At 60, realizing time is limited, people tend to become calmer and spend their remaining years in peace. Eventually, when we think nothing else can trouble us, we might regret dreams left unfulfilled or abandoned 60 years ago. Hold on to your dreams and the valuable experiences you gain in your 20s. Carry them with you throughout life so you never have to regret anything you've done. Learn to forgive rather than criticize and complain about others. Help people and be grateful for the life you've been given. 15. Actions and intentions. In the winter of 1990, I was invited to the Capitol to appear on a talk show on television. On the evening before the day of the recording, as I was driving back to the hotel, I saw something. There, on the snowy, icy sidewalk, was a man sleeping with only a cardboard sheet over him. I was deeply moved to see his bare feet, without shoes or socks. At that moment, I thought I should stop the car and help him, but I was still unsure about what I was about to do. Then, the traffic light turned green. Life seemed to demand that I keep moving. And so, I pressed the accelerator. I quickly forgot about the man by the roadside once I returned to the hotel. The next day, as I was having coffee waiting for my turn in the large lobby, all the important people had left the lobby, leaving only me and the janitor. I had noticed him quietly doing his daily job during my stay there. He never said anything other than, "Good morning," or, "Can I help you with anything, sir?" He always smiled at everyone. Talking to him, I asked how he was feeling today. He told me he had just been biking around in the snow and felt sorry for himself, until he saw a man sleeping on the street corner with just a cardboard for warmth and bare feet. I felt a lump in my throat when he recounted how he cycled around multiple times to buy that poor man a pair of shoes and socks. While listening to the janitor's story, I suddenly remembered a familiar poster image. The poster showed a child trying to reach up to give an adult a flower with the caption, "A small act means more than grand intentions." I stood there wishing I had been the one to buy the shoes and socks for the man on the street when they called me into the recording studio. After the recording, I went back to that street to look for the poor man, but he was already gone. 16. Wisdom in Facing Criticism. Tales of Endurance and Understanding. Story 1. Once, during a relaxed moment, Emperor Tang Taizong asked his close official, Hua Jingtong, "I notice you are a decent man. Why then do people criticize you so much?" Hua Jingtong replied, "Your Majesty, consider this. Spring rains are like oil to farmers who rejoice as their fields are nourished, but travelers curse it for making roads slippery. Autumn's moon shines bright as a mirror hung in the night sky. Poets celebrate it for inspiring their verses, but thieves despise its revealing light. Nature does not play favorites, yet it is still blamed or praised based on people's personal interests. As for me, I am not perfect, so how can I avoid criticism? Therefore, I believe one should calmly consider worldly criticism and not rush to believe it. If a king listens to gossip, it can harm his officials. If parents believe it, their children suffer. If a couple believes it, their family could fall apart. Worldly criticism is more poisonous than snakes, sharper than swords. It kills without shedding blood. Story 2. Once, Buddha was teaching in a region where many followed Brahmanism. The Brahmin priests, seeing their followers turning to Buddha, insulted him as he passed by. Buddha continued walking calmly and they followed, hurling abuse. Annoyed at his silence, they stopped him and asked, "Are you deaf?" "I am not deaf." "If you're not deaf, why don't you respond to my insults?" To the Brahmin follower, if you host a party and your guests leave without accepting your gifts, to whom do the gifts return? The gifts would return to me, of course. Likewise, if you insult me and I don't accept it, then it remains with you. Buddhist scriptures say that when the wicked curse the good and the good do not accept, the wicked are like those who spit upwards. The spit does not reach the heavens but falls back on their own face. Only by accepting do you become attached to suffering. By not accepting, you maintain peace and happiness. Thus, if you hear someone speaking ill of you, do not accept it, and you will be at peace. According to Buddhism, verbal actions are among the heaviest deeds one can commit. Wounds inflicted by words can take longer to heal than those inflicted by physical harm. Therefore, be mindful of your words. Do not create disputes through carelessness, nor blame others for their faults, because every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. 17. 8 Principles for Greater Happiness. 1. Stay optimistic in tough situations. Optimists aren't superheroes. They simply focus on the positive even during hard times. Instead of letting worries take over, they manage stress and strive to improve themselves daily. 2. Avoid assuming the worst. Problems often won't arise if we don't dwell on them. Optimists skip pointless worries like, "What if they don't like me?" and focus on practical thoughts like, "Today is going to be a busy day." 3. Don't compare yourself to others. Positive people understand that everyone has their own unique path. They believe in their own actions and capabilities, focusing on personal growth rather than others' lives. 4. Don't exaggerate small mistakes. Viewing failures as catastrophic is a non-starter for optimists. They see failures as normal life events that challenge them and provide valuable lessons. 5. Accept life isn't perfect. Optimists don't expect life to be perfect. Rather than waiting for the perfect day to act, they take action today and in the present moment, knowing that waiting for perfection is futile. 6. Don't let others' moods control you. Positive people don't let negative thoughts drag them down. In tough times, they surround themselves with positive, cheerful people and remind themselves that happiness is a personal choice. 7. Avoid boredom. Boredom can kill creativity and enthusiasm. Thus, Positive people remain excited about everything around them, exploring the world with curiosity and youthful enthusiasm. 8. Don't see problems as problems. Optimists don't see obstacles as problems, but as undiscovered opportunities. They embrace challenges to grow and develop. 9. Don't blame others. Constantly blaming something or someone else won't allow you to stand on your own. Like a child learning to walk, optimists accept their mistakes and face them without blaming circumstances. These principles highlight the power of a positive outlook and proactive attitude toward life's challenges. 18. Which bread is the best? A wandering beggar had gone more than a day without food. As he reached a certain street corner, he smelled the delicious aroma of bread coming from a house. The beggar was in luck. It was a bakery. "Please, could you give this unfortunate soul a piece of bread to ease my hunger?" the beggar pleaded with the bakery owner. "Oh, you are a wise man. You've come to the right place," the baker began, talking at length. "How did you know to come to my bakery? Who told you? Surely it's because my bread is so well known. I'll share a secret with you. My bread is made from a family recipe passed down for 7 generations. It's documented in that red leather-bound book on the shelf over there. See it?" The beggar tried to smile. "Yes, but, sir, I am very hungry. I haven't eaten anything for over a day. Please be kind, I just need a slice of bread." Ignoring the beggar's pained expression, the owner continued to preach about his dough-mixing secrets. He pulled the beggar closer to the oven. Batch after batch of bread came out, hot and smelling wonderful. "See how beautiful and fragrant fresh bread is? Baking bread is an art. To make good, beautiful bread, you must love the craft." "But, sir, I'm hungry. Please, I beg you," the beggar stuttered. "You must understand, people need many things, but bread is essential. No one can live without bread. That's why I knocked on your door." The beggar timidly interjected. "Hold on. Let me finish. Not everyone is as ethical as me. Come here." The bakery owner led the beggar to the door and continued. "See this street? Every house has a bread oven, but don't trust them. Some add bad flour, some use too much salt, others bake it too much. And they dare to call what they make bread." "Sir, I just want a piece of bread to eat," the beggar reiterated tiredly. "But what I'm about to tell you is most important," the owner continued, waving his hands. Suddenly, the beggar turned and walked away slowly. "Hey, you don't like my bread? It's the best in the region, made with a recipe from 7 generations ago," the bakery owner called after him. "No, sir. Bread elsewhere might be saltier, made with worse flour and burnt, but at least it fills my stomach. Here, only my ears are full." 19. The roots of maturity. Human strength is shaped in one's weaknesses. When I was young, I had a neighbor everyone called Dr. Gibbs. He wasn't like any doctor I knew. He was simple and kind, especially to us, a bunch of mischievous kids. Outside his life-saving job, Dr. Gibbs loved gardening. He wanted to turn his 10-acre plot into a forest. The gentle doctor had interesting theories about planting that were contrary to common beliefs. He never watered newly grown plants. He explained that watering would spoil them, and the next generation of plants would grow weaker. Therefore, it was essential to let them face hardships. Any plant that couldn't withstand would be removed right away. He also taught me how to water plants with aerial roots so they would have to dig deep for water when dry. It's no wonder I never saw him water the plants. He planted an oak tree, and instead of watering it every morning, he would hit it with a rolled-up newspaper. Thump, thump, thump. When I asked why he did that, he said it was to make the tree pay attention. Dr. Gibbs passed away 2 years after I moved away from home. Now, looking back at his rows of trees, I can imagine him planting them 25 years ago. The trees that were once saplings have now grown strong and vibrant. Like robust young men, they wake up each morning, proudly puff out their chests, and are ready to face any hardships and challenges. Years later, I also planted 2 trees. During the hot summers, I watered them, and during the cold winters, I sprayed them with medicine and prayed for them. They grew nearly 30 feet tall in 2 years, but were always dependent on my care. Just a cold wind passing by, and they would tremble and drop their branches, just like weaklings. It's different from Dr. Gibbs' forest. It seems that adversity and deprivation are more beneficial for them than abundance. Every night before going to sleep, I visit my 2 sons' room and watch them sleeping peacefully. Seeing their small bodies breathe the rhythm of life, I always prayed for their comfortable lives. But recently, I've started to think it's time to change that prayer. I pray for them to be stronger, to withstand the storms they can't avoid in life. It's naive to wish them away from hardships because difficulties and challenges are inevitable. And whether we like it or not, life is never smooth. I pray that the roots of my children will grow deep, so they can draw strength from the hidden sources of life everlasting. Looking back, I realize I've prayed too much for peace, but seldom do those wishes come true. What we really need is to develop strong bodies and resilient wills, so when the heat scorches or the storms rage, we will never fall.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
20. Buddha's teachings on loyalty in love. Late at night, in a temple, a man knelt before Buddha, seeking guidance on matters of love. Man: Honorable Buddha, I am a married man deeply in love with another woman. I am truly lost on what to do. Buddha: Can you confirm that this woman you love is the only and final one for you in your life? Man: Yes, I believe so. Buddha: Why not divorce and marry her? Man: But my current wife is kind, good, and gentle. Would leaving her be cruel and unethical? Buddha: In a marriage without love, staying is what's truly cruel and unethical. You no longer love your wife because you love another. Leaving is the right thing to do. Man: But my wife still loves me deeply. Buddha: Then she is truly happy. Man: If I leave her for another, she'll be devastated. How can she be happy then? Buddha: In your marriage, she still feels love for you, but you've lost your love for her. Because you love someone else. Losing happiness is painful. Thus, you are the one who suffers. Man: If I leave my wife and marry another, she will lose me and remain in pain. Buddha: You're mistaken. You are the one she truly loves in the marriage. When someone like you is no longer there, her true love will continue with someone else. She has never lost true love. Therefore, she is the one who is truly happy, and you are the one who is suffering. Man: My wife once said she would only love me in this lifetime. She won't love anyone else. Buddha: Haven't you said the same once? Man: I... Buddha: Now look at the 3 candles before you. Which one shines the brightest? Man: I really can't tell. They all seem to shine the same. Buddha: Those candles are like the 3 women. One is the woman you currently love. Among countless beings, women are not just millions but billions. If you can't even determine which candle shines the brightest, how can you be sure this woman is the final and only one for you? Man: Buddha: Now hold a candle close and see which shines brightest. Man: Of course, the one in front of me shines brightest. Buddha: Put it back and see which shines brightest now. Man: Truly, I still can't discern which one is the brightest. Buddha: Just like the candle you just held, the woman you currently love seems brightest when close to your heart. Once she is away, you cannot find that feeling again. The so-called final and only love of yours is merely an illusion, like flowers in a mirror or the moon reflected on the water. Ultimately, it is void, an empty affair. Man, I understand now. Buddha, you're not urging me to divorce hastily, but helping me to see the truth. Buddha, understanding doesn't need to be spelled out. Go on your way. Man, now I truly know who I love. It is my wife I have now. Buddha, Adida Fat. Conclusion. The truth of happiness does not wait for a future life, nor does it need to be sought elsewhere. It exists right here and now. Everyone has a source of genuine happiness, but people often fail to recognize it, chasing after fleeting joys instead. 21. The Old Fisherman. Our house is located right across from the entrance of Johns Hopkins Hospital. My family lives on the ground floor and we rent out the upstairs rooms to patients. One evening, while I was making soup for dinner, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find an incredibly unattractive man standing there. He was hunched and wrinkled, hardly taller than my 8-year-old son. His face was what really caught attention, though. It was red and asymmetrical. Despite his appearance, he had a very friendly voice. "Hello, I was wondering if you might have a room available for just tonight. I'm here from the East Coast for treatment and don't have a bus back until tomorrow morning." He explained how he had been searching for a room all afternoon, but found nothing available. "I guess it's because of my face. I know it looks scary, but the doctor says I just need a few more treatments." I hesitated for a moment, but his next words convinced me. "I can sleep on a couch in the lobby as my bus leaves very early." I insisted on finding him a proper bed instead of letting him sleep on a couch. After finishing my dinner preparation, I invited him to join us for the meal. "Oh, no need. I've got plenty of food," he said, showing a brown paper bag. After dinner, I talked with him in the hallway and quickly realized that within this small man was a heart of great kindness. He mentioned he fished for a living to support his daughter, 5 grandchildren, and a son-in-law who was completely disabled after an accident. There was no bitterness in his voice, only gratitude for his painless condition and thankfulness for the faith that kept him going. At bedtime, I set up a foldable bed in the kids' room for him. The next morning, he had neatly folded the linens and was already in the lobby. He declined breakfast and seemed a bit hesitant, but asked, "Can I come back here for my next treatment? I won't be any trouble. I can sleep on the couch." He paused and added, "Your kids made me feel at home. Adults might be put off by my face, but the kids didn't seem to mind." I assured him he was always welcome back. When he returned the next time, he brought us a huge fish and a jar full of the biggest oysters I'd ever seen, freshly shucked that morning. Despite his bus having left at 4 in the morning, I didn't know how early he had gotten up to prepare all this. Throughout the years he stayed with us, he never came without bringing something. Sometimes I even received these gifts through the mail. Considering the distance from his house to the post office and the cost of mailing fresh items, his gifts were truly generous. Once a neighbor commented, "You let that hideous old man stay over? I turned him away. You could lose customers by letting people like him stay at your place." We might have lost a customer or two, but once they knew him, those thoughts surely faded. My family has always been grateful to have known him. We've learned that life doesn't always bring fortunes, but it's important to live optimistically and be open to whatever comes our way, instead of just complaining. 22. A lesson awakened by a cow. Sometimes what you thought was true isn't right at all. It could just be a conclusion drawn from ungrounded experiences you never questioned. Once upon a time, there was a wise and experienced teacher who wanted to teach one of his students the secrets to a happy and prosperous life. Knowing the hardships and barriers many people face in pursuit of happiness, He thought the first lesson should be to explain why many live only mediocre lives. Ultimately, the teacher thought, too many people, both men and women, seem unable to overcome obstacles that prevent success, settling for a life of deficiency and hardship. He knew it was vital for a young person to see what happens if we let mediocrity rule our lives. To teach these important lessons, the teacher decided to take his student to a poor village nearby. The scene was one of misery and desolation, and the villagers seemed to have resigned themselves to fate. Upon arrival, the teacher asked his student to find the poorest family in the area where they could stay overnight. They walked to the outskirts of the town, where they stood before the most ramshackle hut they had ever seen. This nearly collapsing structure was clearly the home of the poorest family in the village. The walls seemed to stand only by a miracle, threatening to fall apart at any moment. Water leaked through a makeshift roof that hardly provided any shelter, and all sorts of trash piled against the walls only added to the dilapidated appearance. Alerted by a young boy, the homeowner came out and warmly welcomed them. "Hello, dear friend," the teacher replied. "Would you mind if 2 weary travelers stayed here for the night? It's cramped here, but you're welcome to stay if you don't mind." As they entered, they were shocked to see a tiny space, no larger than a small room, where 8 people lived. A father, mother, 4 children, and 2 elderly grandparents all tried to make room for each other in this cramped condition. The painfully thin bodies and tattered clothes were clear signs of their daily struggles. The sad faces and stooped figures showed that poverty had taken over not just their bodies but their spirits too. The visitors couldn't help but look around, wondering if there was anything of value in this desperate place. Nothing at all. However, upon stepping outside, they realized they were wrong. Amazingly, the family owned one unusual asset, a cow. The cow wasn't remarkable, but the family's daily life seemed to revolve around this animal. Feed the cow. Don't let it thirst. Tie it securely. Don't forget to take it to graze. Milk the cow. Indeed, the cow played an essential role in this family's life, although the scant milk it provided barely helped them scrape by day to day. Yet, the cow seemed to serve a greater purpose. It was the only thing keeping them from utter ruin. In a place where everything was scarce, owning such a valuable asset brought them admiration, if not envy, from their neighbors. And there, amidst the filth and chaos, the teacher and his student laid down to rest for the night. The next morning, before dawn, the teacher and student quietly left, careful not to wake the others. The student looked back, wanting to etch the miserable scene into his memory. He didn't understand why his teacher had brought him here. However, before they reached the main road, the old teacher whispered, "It's time for you to understand what brought us to this miserable place." During their short visit, they had witnessed a life nearly abandoned, but the student still didn't understand why that family lived in such dire conditions. What forced them to stay there? The teacher slowly approached the cow tied to a shaky fence post not far from the hut. As he came within a step of the cow, the old teacher pulled out a dagger he carried with him. The student was perplexed. As the teacher raised his hand, the student was shocked to see his teacher slash the cow's throat. The fatal cut brought the animal down. "Look what you've done," the student asked in pain, whispering to avoid waking anyone. "How could you kill that poor animal? What kind of lesson is this that leads the family to utter ruin? This is all they had. What will they do now?" Unmoved by his student's distress and ignoring his questions, the teacher walked away, leaving the horrific scene behind, oblivious to the disaster the family would face now that they had lost their cow. The student followed, still full of doubts, and they continued on their way. The family was forced into a precarious situation, fraught with difficulties and the possibility of even greater poverty. In the days that followed, the student was haunted by the terrible thought that the entire family might starve if they didn't have the cow. Could he draw any other conclusion from the loss of their only source of livelihood? For months, he was tormented by these thoughts and the memory of that sad morning. A year later, one afternoon, the old teacher suggested they return to the village to see what had happened to the family. Just a small hint about an event that seemed to have been forgotten was enough to awaken in the student the vivid memory of the lesson that, even now, he couldn't fully understand. Once again, the student's mind was filled with thoughts about the destitute family and the role he had played in their fate. What had happened to them? Did they survive that severe blow? Did they manage to start a new life? Could he face them after what his teacher had done? Despite the turmoil in his thoughts, the student reluctantly agreed and reluctantly joined the trip that might clarify the events that had troubled him all year. After several days, they reached the old village. They looked in vain for the hut from the previous year. The surrounding scene looked the same, but the miserable place they had stayed was nowhere to be found, replaced instead by a newly built, pretty house on the old land. They stopped and looked around to be sure they had come to the right place. The student feared that the cow's death was a blow too severe for such a bare family to survive. Perhaps they had been forced to leave, and another more fortunate family had taken over the land and built the new house. What other possibility could there be? Surely the shame had driven them to wander. As these thoughts circled in his mind, the student hesitated between wanting to know what had happened to the family and deciding to continue on his way, avoiding the unpleasant task of confirming his worst suspicions. But eventually, he decided to find out. He needed to know. So he knocked on the door of the house and waited. In a moment, a cheerful man came out from inside. At first, the student didn't recognize him. But then he couldn't hide his astonishment when he realized it was the man who had hosted them last year. It was clearly the same person, but something was very different about him. He wore clean, neatly groomed clothes. He had a smile on his lips and a spark in his eyes. Clearly, something significant had happened in his life. The young man could hardly believe his eyes. How could this be? What could have happened in just 1 year? He rushed to greet the man and immediately interrogated him about the stroke of luck that had come to him and his family. "Just last year, when we stopped by here," he said, "you seemed to be living in a state of misery and hopelessness. Tell me what happened to change your situation so much. What brought you such fortune?" Unaware that it was these very guests who had killed the cow, the man invited them inside and began to tell the thrilling story of his family. The story would forever change the life of our young friend. The homeowner explained that it was a strange coincidence that, right on the day the teacher and student left, some malicious person, perhaps envious of the family's rare asset, had cruelly slit the animal's throat. "I must admit," the man said, "our first reaction was one of utter despair and pain. For a long time, the milk from that cow was our only source of livelihood. Moreover, it was the only asset we had. Our lives depended on it. That cow was the center of our daily existence. To be honest, having that animal gave us a sense of security and brought us admiration from the neighbors. Not long after that tragic day, we realized that if we didn't do something, we could only end up in a worse situation. We had hit rock bottom with the loss of that animal. We still needed to eat and provide for our children. And then we cleared a patch of land behind the house, planting a few vegetables and fruits. That's how we survived the initial months. After a while, we noticed that the garden provided more food than we needed. If we could sell to people nearby, we could buy more seeds. Soon, we not only had enough to eat but could also take our produce to market. And then it happened, the man excitedly said. For the first time in our lives, we had money to buy food and clothes. and we saw hope for a new life, a life that we had never even imagined, not even in our dreams, could become a reality. We built this little house just last month. It seems that losing the cow opened our eyes to another life full of possibilities." The young man was amazed to hear the story. Finally, he realized the lesson his respected teacher wanted to teach him. Suddenly, everything made sense. The death of the cow wasn't an end for them as he had feared, but had opened up a new life with better opportunities. The homeowner invited the teacher and student to stay overnight, and they gladly accepted. The next morning, they said goodbye to the homeowner and his family, continuing their journey. The teacher, who had been silent until now, asked his student, still amazed by what he had heard and seen, "Do you think that family would have achieved what they did over the past year if they still had that cow?" "Probably not," the student replied without hesitation. "Do you understand now? The cow they cherished as a treasure was actually the chain that bound their lives to poverty. They were convinced that the cow saved them from collapse, but it took losing that false security for them to look in a new direction. In other words," the student continued, "the cow, the animal their neighbors saw as a blessing, gave them the feeling they weren't living in poverty, but in reality, their lives were quite miserable." "That's right," the old teacher said. "That's what happens when you believe that the little you have is enough. Just that thought alone is a heavy chain that prevents you from seeking better things. Satisfaction begins to ruin your life. You accept your circumstances even though you're not happy with them. You know you're not happy with your place in life, but you also don't feel miserable. You're dissatisfied with the life you're living, but the dissatisfaction isn't big enough for you to do something about it. Do you see how tragic that is? When you have a job you don't like, a job that even fails to meet your basic needs and doesn't give you any personal satisfaction or the life you want, then the decision to leave and look for another job is easy. But when the job you don't like helps you pay debts, survive, and also enjoy a few comforts, then you easily fall into the trap of being content with the thought that at least you have something. Ultimately, you justify that many people want that job and couldn't get it. Like the cow, that attitude always holds you back. If you don't cast it aside, you'll never see anything beyond what you've already known. You'll become a lifelong victim of the limits you've set in your own life. It's like being blindfolded at the starting line and praying for a win." The student listened more and more astonished. He was intrigued by his teacher's insights and began to understand the issues thoroughly. "We all have cows in our lives. We carry the burden of mistaken beliefs, excuses, fears, and prejudices. Tragically, all the limitations we impose on ourselves tie us to a mediocre life. Not only that," the old teacher continued, "many people stubbornly keep the reasons they can't live the life they've always dreamed of. They create nearly believable excuses to justify themselves and others, and continue to live with internal turmoil as they realize that those arguments might deceive others, but not themselves." "That's a big lesson," the student said thoughtfully, turning his thoughts to his own cows. On the way back, he carefully examined all the limitations he had imposed on himself in his life, and he decided to get rid of all the beliefs that had tied him to a dull and ordinary life, and had prevented him from realizing his true potential. No doubt, he told himself, that day marked the beginning of a new life, a life without cows.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
23. Unpaved paths. My father was a huge man, 6 feet tall and weighed about 330 pounds. His voice was loud and deep, and you always got the impression it was better not to share a meal with him. When he stood there with his fiery eyes blazing and scorching you with his hot temper, you knew what fear was, a fear I had known since I was very young. Whenever I did something wrong, There was no discussion about what I had done or any reasoning to help me change my behavior. Just the belt, a tough leather belt. From the first time he hit me, I knew that fear always carried a belt. When my father and his friends gathered at our house, they would cause chaos as Dad reminisced about his days as the Golden Gloves boxing champion. Whenever Dad squared off with someone, they would back down. They knew they were no match for him because no one was tougher and more enduring than my dad. I felt lucky when Dad was away most of the time. He worked operating heavy machinery for a road construction crew, and his job kept him on the road for days at a time. But every Friday night when I saw his car pull into the driveway, I would run and hide. Then Mom would give him a report of how I had misbehaved all week. Soon he would call me to the kitchen. As Dad yelled in my face, the smell of alcohol and cigarettes would hit me, making me want to vomit. "I'm not in the mood for this," he would shout. "I work hard all week and I come home to this?" Then the belt would come off. What Dad didn't realize was that his way of punishing only encouraged the behavior he was trying to prevent. And whenever I told him that, he would get even angrier and shout, "Don't do as I do, do as I say." This misguided form of punishment led to more problems as I grew up, and what made it worse was that there was no turning back. I was terrified of Dad and didn't know what to expect from his bursts of anger. I vowed that when I was old enough, I would leave home and live as far away from Dad as possible. Eventually, my parents divorced, and I hadn't seen Dad for years. Mom kept in touch, and one day she called me to say that Dad had been to the doctor and was very weak. I wondered what to do now or if I should do anything at all. We weren't close. How could we be close after all the things he had said and done when I was young? I even disliked men in general. But strangely, I felt a weird pull in my heart and I decided to call Dad. "Dad, it's Lindy." "Lindy?" he said, sounding as though he was scrolling through his memory of anyone named Lindy he had known. There was a pause. I hesitated, carefully choosing my words. "I heard you're not well and decided to call. The doctors say I don't have long." "What's wrong, Dad?" He started to cry and mumbled a few words I couldn't understand. Then he hung up. A few weeks went by, and as I thought about Dad's condition and what role I should take, I received another call from Mom saying that Dad had been moved to a hospice. Hesitation turned to despair. I knew what hospice meant. I didn't want to believe that his illness was in its final stage. How much time did Dad have left? I needed to know that. I drove to the hospice in a rush. When I arrived, 2 nurses and a doctor were there to comfort me. After reviewing Dad's records, I had all the information I needed. All the years of heavy drinking had finally taken their toll. Dad had chronic cirrhosis, which had led to cancer spreading throughout his body. I was horrified by what was to come. I felt out of place. What could I say to a man I hadn't seen in so many years? I felt like I was in someone else's life scene. Unsure of what I was doing, I walked towards Dad's room, pushing the door open with a strength I didn't know I had. And although I walked very slowly, I reached Dad's room too quickly. As I hesitated at the entrance, Dad saw me and told me to come in. "Look at me, Lindy," he said and cried. Then he lifted his arm and showed me his swollen skin. "I'm fading, and there's nothing I can do." "I know, Dad," I said, trying not to feel his pain. Then I listened to him talk. He talked about my mom and how things hadn't gone well. He told me he had tried to do the best he could for me, but everything always turned out wrong. "I love you, Lindy," he sobbed. "I'm sorry for the wrongs I've done to you." I held him as he expressed his regrets, and though I said nothing, my comforting gestures showed that I had forgiven him. Leaving the hospice, my head was spinning. All in one night I felt overwhelmed, scared, forgiving, and sorrowful. My father was a diminished man, not the man I knew growing up. Nothing could touch him then. He was the Golden Gloves champion. My vulnerability broke, and I began to cry out loud like a child. I cried not only for what Dad and I hadn't had in our father-son relationship, but also for what we could still have had if Dad wasn't about to die. Now, Dad seemed to have changed and become a father I could live with, but he was about to leave, and neither of us could do anything about it anymore. But time was still there. Over the next few weeks, I visited Dad every evening after work. We sat and talked. I even ran errands for him and bought him a few things he needed. I began to see sides of Dad I had never known before. I'd only known the bad sides of Dad, but now I was beginning to see the good sides, and we were becoming friends. But just as our friendship was beginning to bloom, it was his turn to be in the worst state. One evening, when I visited him, a nurse told me they didn't think he would make it through the night. The doctor had increased the morphine dose, but it was still not steady, and Dad was in a lot of pain. They told me that every 15 minutes the machine would beep, and at that moment I could press a button to deliver a steady dose of morphine into Dad's body. I decided to stay with him through the night. Dad spoke very little, and every time the machine beeped I pressed the button, realizing that each time I did that it became harder for us to talk any longer. Dad held on for 2 more days, and I was there when he passed away. I held his hand, kissed his forehead, and said, "It's okay, Dad. You can go now. Grandma and Grandpa are waiting for you, and now you can make roads in heaven." Dad had been a great road worker. He had paved the way to bridge the gap between us. 24. The heartwarming letter about Santa Claus that continues to inspire after a century. In 1897, an 8-year-old girl sent a letter to the New York Sun asking, "Is Santa Claus real?" Surprisingly, the response became famous and has been retold every Christmas season for over 100 years. Almost every child, come Christmas, wonders whether Santa Claus really exists. Around 120 years ago, a similar question was asked by 8-year-old Virginia O'Hanlon from Manhattan, New York. Instead of answering her directly, her father suggested she write to the Sun, a well-known newspaper at the time. The little girl wrote, "Dear editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says, if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus?" "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists just as surely as love and generosity are present around us, making our lives joyful and happy. Imagine how dreary the world would be without Santa Claus. What would the world be like without children like you? Then life would lack young souls, poetry, and romance, and people would be nothing more than emotionless machines. The light of belief and hope that children hold across the globe would also vanish." Editor Francis Pharcellus responded to the young girl in a letter published on September 21, 1897. The response included, "Virginia, your friends are wrong. People like that doubt everything. They only believe what they can see and understand, although their minds are so small. Virginia, the intelligence of both adults and children is small. In the vast universe we inhabit, if the truth were imagined as a boundless space, human knowledge would be just a speck. If you don't believe in Santa Claus, you wouldn't believe in fairy tales either. You might ask your father to have someone watch the door on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus, but even if you don't see him, does that prove anything? No one has seen Santa Claus in person, but that doesn't mean he doesn't exist. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor adults can see. Have you ever seen fairies dancing on the lawn? Probably not, but that's not proof they don't exist. No one can understand or imagine all the wonders that they have never seen and can't see in our world. You could smash a watch to find out what makes it tick, but there's a magical world covered by a sturdy veil that no earthly power can penetrate. Only with faith and love can we lift that veil and see the stunning beauty inside. Is it all real? Virginia, that is the most real thing in the world. Is Santa Claus real? Thank God he lives, and he will live forever. Thousands of years from now, Virginia, no, hundreds of thousands of years from now, he will continue to bring joy and happiness to young hearts around the planet. Merry Christmas, Virginia.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
25. Balancing trust and skepticism in a world of uncertainties. When in doubt, leave room for trust, and vice versa. Learning to trust is important. However, sometimes over-trusting your instincts can lead to setbacks. Someone once said, "If you trust, you have a 50% chance of success. If you don't, your chances drop to 0." I've embraced this idea and learned to trust in many situations, which often worked out well. For example, I was initially skeptical about meeting an online friend because something about his way of chatting seemed off, but I decided to meet him anyway. We met at a small park and talked for hours about various life topics. I realized he wasn't as bad as I thought, which made me question why I had been so negative. I was invited to a digital marketing workshop with no clear details about the organizers, just an address. I was suspicious and thought it might be a scam. Despite my fears, I went. Initially, I felt uncomfortable with the networking activities, thinking it resembled a multi-level marketing scheme. But as the workshop progressed, it became lively and engaging, focusing thoroughly on digital marketing. This experience showed me that I had been too suspicious. Because of my past experiences, I became overly trusting in another situation online where I intended to sell a virtual gaming account. In the online gaming world, it's normal for virtual items to be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. I trusted the process as I would in real life. Unfortunately, I made a mistake in whom I trusted. The transaction went through, and I lost my gaming account without receiving any payment. This made me start questioning the world again. Why is it that when I doubt, there's usually nothing wrong, but when I trust my instincts, I end up being wrong? Then I realized that skepticism should be applied in every situation, even when your trust is complete, because even in the most trustworthy situations, you should be prepared for the unexpected. I wasn't prepared for an unexpected outcome, which made the disappointment harder to handle. Trust and skepticism should be balanced. When you doubt, leave room for trust, and vice versa. Life is full of uncertainties that can be hard to believe, disappoint you, or even surprise you beyond your wildest expectations. But above all, trust yourself the most. When it comes to others or anything else, a bit of wisdom and doubt is still necessary. 26. Secrets of the Green Forest. News that young author Lê Hu Nam's novel, Secrets of the Green Forest, won the 2015 Young Writers Award from the Ho Chi Minh City Writers Association touched many people. Despite battling a severe heart condition and facing personal hardships, Nam has been an active community supporter and a talented writer who conveys messages about environmental threats. His remarkable achievements under adverse circumstances are truly noteworthy. We had a chance to speak with him. Reporter: the 2015 Young Writers Award is a well-deserved recognition. How do you feel at this moment? Lê Hu Nam: I'm truly delighted. Secrets of the Green Forest is a work close to my heart, written with a love for literature and stirred by a passion for nature and the fear that a permanently green environment might remain just a dream for children. I wanted to convey my message through the art of writing and am gratified by the reception from readers, and now professional recognition. This award encourages not just me but also other young individuals pursuing literature. Could you elaborate on the message you wish to convey through Secrets of the Green Forest? I'm constantly concerned about the tragedy of people who cherish nature but are voiceless. Why are forests destroyed and innocent animals hunted to extinction for the satisfaction of a few? This is also a confession to future generations, reminding us that we come from nature and are protected by it, and thus should not be cruel to it. The battle to protect the forest in your book includes foreign characters alongside Vietnamese. What makes your work stand out in terms of structure and imagery compared to others? First, I arrange the characters, including children and elders, to show that this fight involves multiple generations and backgrounds united in protecting nature. Secondly, my creativity, though limited, shines in Secrets of the Green Forest, where characters like Mien, Lamb, Joe, and Susan, though from real life, are mysterious, representing a blend of Eastern and Western child traits. They embody a form of enlightening, non-doctrinaire education that children deserve. Thirdly, including foreign elements in the story signifies that the battle for nature knows no borders, languages, or ethnicities. It's a universal language of love and fairness. The cover of Secrets of the Green Forest has been reprinted. After Secrets of the Green Forest, what are your plans for future works? I've written a few more books to be published at the upcoming Ho Chi Minh City Book Fair in 2016. These include a collection of essays, a short story collection, and a novel I started at the same time as Secrets of the Green Forest. Despite your health challenges, you maintain an impressive work rate. How is your daily life now? Currently, I'm still writing for a living, fully devoted to my creative projects. Although physically limited, my life is stable mentally, which helps me overcome difficulties. From your unique experiences, how do you view the role of literature in human life? It seems that each of us gets caught in the increasingly rapid pace of life. Sometimes we embrace it eagerly, but other times we feel lost, unsure of our direction or purpose, even as we intensely commit to this cycle. As a young writer and reader, I see literature as a source of clear, wise thinking that transcends all aspects of human life. True literature guides us towards beauty, inspiring us amid the erosion caused by narrow-minded and selfish ideologies threatening our living environment. 27. Reflections on friendship, diverse perspectives on bonds and connections. Talking about friends, someone once said, "You are someone who changes your entire world even though it's just a part of it. You can bring a smile, share every tear. Someone who makes you believe that there's still something wonderful in life. Someone who always opens their heart to you." However, there are simpler sayings and ideas about friendship and the people we call friends. One person said, "Friendship is a relationship that needs to be nurtured slowly and for a long time." Another mentioned, "Growing up, I continued to be carefree and kind, always helping friends, and thus I found good friends. To this day, I can share a life tip for having good friends. Open your heart and plant seeds of affection, and eventually, you will harvest the sweet fruits of friendship. Help others whenever you can, even if they take advantage of you. Don't regret it if that happens. Just be carefree. Others will recognize your sincerity. Trust me, I've succeeded with this method." Someone else added, "As for how to interact with friends, my view on friendship is simple. I just give it my all, helping in any way I can." Another person shared, "Friends are those I enjoy talking to. Friends are the family I choose." Another noted, "Friendship is like a thread. Both people hold it, and if it breaks, at least you hold on to your end. It's enough each time we meet to call each other friend and smile. That's good enough for me." Yet another expressed, "Friendship is complicated, always at the forefront. There are many friends, but it's hard to know who is good or bad, which friendships will last or fade. It doesn't matter. What's important is to cherish the friends you have." Another described, "Friendship is also about understanding each other. It's simple yet profound, hard to explain." Finally, someone remarked, I'm not cautious with friends, not too enthusiastic nor too reserved. I feel I'm very friendly, but because of my quirky nature, making friends is easy, but not many people like my odd ways, and that's fine by me. I don't need many friends, just someone who understands me. I like being myself. I don't like pandering to others or being indulged, if not to say the opposite. I think because I'm difficult. Anyone who tolerates me is a true friend, and I'm confident that I always deserve to be a good friend. What would you say about your friendships and your friends? 28. Thorny rose. He really is a grumpy old man. Becky said to the old man as she left his hospital room at the humanitarian hospital where she had been working for over a year. This new patient had been here for about 2 weeks, and he made life hell for all the nurses. He cursed, shouted, and kicked anyone who came close to him. Not to mention he intentionally spilled food on the bed so the nurses would have to clean it up, giving him more reasons to curse. Becky didn't think he had any family since no one visited him, at least during the time she cared for him. One day, a women's group visited the hospital. They sang and brought roses, giving each patient a bright red flower. The cranky old man looked at the flower nicely placed in a glass vase on the table, and with the back of his hand he knocked the vase over. It shattered on the floor. Everyone just stared at him in disbelief. He turned away and faced the wall, turning his back on the women from the group. Someone began to clean up the broken pieces of the vase. Becky picked up the flower, placed it in a plastic cup, and set it on the old man's bedside cabinet. After the women's group had left, Becky returned to the grumpy patient's room, took the rose, and began plucking its petals one by one, throwing them into the trash can next to her. The old man watched her until she plucked the last petal. Only the stem remained, which she put back into the plastic cup. Just as she was about to leave, the old man grumbled, "Why did you do that?" "I just wanted you to see what you have done," Becky replied. "You have destroyed our care for you just like plucking each petal one by one since you got here." Then Becky walked out. The next morning, when she arrived at the hospital, the doctors told Becky to clean the old man's room. He had passed away the night before. As Becky was gathering the sheets to be washed, she saw the rose still intact in the plastic cup. The petals had been clumsily taped back onto the stem. She also found a Bible under the old man's pillow. As she picked up the book, a piece of paper fell out, which read, "I didn't want everyone to hate me. I just didn't want to be forgotten by everyone. I was an orphan child and I never had a family." As an orphan herself, Becky understood that the old man wasn't just a grumpy old man. He acted out because no one in the world cared about him. He felt that everyone had forgotten him, even while he was still alive, and all he really wanted was for someone to remember him. 29. A nighttime ride. I work as a taxi driver. Not many drivers choose the night shift, but after my recent breakup with Rachel, I agreed to it. That New Year's Eve, I had a passenger who left a lasting impression on me. I got a call at 2:30 a.m. I stopped the car in a dark area lit only by a light from a small ground floor window. Normally, like any taxi driver, I would honk once or twice and wait a bit. If no one came out, I'd drive away. But for some reason, I got out of the car and walked up to the door, thinking maybe they needed help, and knocked. "Please wait a moment," a shaky voice responded. After a brief silence, the door opened. A small, elderly woman stood there in a floral dress with a small hat veiled over her face, a little suitcase at her feet. The room behind her looked like it hadn't been lived in for years, with everything covered in white sheets. "Could you help me with my things to the car?" she asked. I picked up the surprisingly light suitcase with one hand and offered the other to help her walk. We moved slowly to the car. "You're very kind," she said softly, her eyes not looking at me as if speaking to someone else. As we got into the car, she gave me an address and asked, could we drive through the old market area? That's not the shortest way, ma'am. I'm not in a hurry. After a pause, she added, I'm going to a nursing home. Her eyes sparkled. That's fine. The doctors say I don't have much longer anyway. I turned off the meter and asked, where would you like to go first? For 2 hours, we drove around the city. She pointed out the building where she used to work, the apartment she and her husband rented when they first got married. She asked me to stop in front of a furniture store that used to be a dance hall where she danced as a young woman. Occasionally, she asked me to slow down as we passed a particularly memorable building or street corner in the quiet and dark. As the first rays of sun appeared on the horizon, she suddenly said, I'm tired. Let's go. We arrived at the address she had given me without another word. It was a nursing home for the elderly with no family. 2 attendants and a wheelchair were waiting at the gate. The old lady paused, pulling out her wallet, and asked softly, how much do I owe you? Nothing at all, I said. You need to make a living, she replied, still gently, without any surprise. There will be other passengers, I answered. Without thinking, I bent down and hugged her. She hugged me back tightly. You have given me so much, she said. Thank you. I squeezed her hand lightly, then walked away. It was still dim outside. Behind me, the doors of the nursing home closed, marking the end of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that day. I drove around, lost in thought, and wondered what would have happened if she had met a harsh driver or one in a hurry on her last ride. What if I had honked and driven off or refused her unusual route? And I realized, despite my own loneliness and past hardships, there is still much love in my heart, and therefore not all doors are closed yet.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
30. The shirt button. Startled awake, I felt parched and stumbled to the fridge for a drink. The cold water woke me up. It was past 4 a.m. I turned on my computer and opened my diary software to jot down the day's events and thoughts. Instead, a flashing red message greeted me. Next week marks the first day I met M. Smiling at my youthful memories, I adjusted the program to revisit that first day. I decided to scour the internet for a unique greeting card to send her. After finding the perfect one, I pulled open a drawer to grab a CD with my photo to include in the card, but noticed a neatly wrapped gift instead. Realizing it was from M, I eagerly opened it. Inside was a large card, and beneath it, a charming desktop clock and a shirt button. Curious about the button, I read the card. Dear love, it's been 3 years since we met. I've been so happy and learned so much from you. You are incredibly talented and kind to everyone, living harmoniously without concern for wealth or status. You dedicate yourself to others and are deeply respected and loved by your friends and colleagues. Tonight, like many nights, I arrived at your house at 9 p.m. and you weren't home yet. I saw your mother mending your shirt, which had a burn mark from a cigarette. It made me think of you and all the things I've observed at your house. I'm gifting you this clock with a message. Time relentlessly moves forward. Some things can wait until tomorrow, but some cannot. And a shirt button with a heartfelt message. Sometimes people know a lot, yet they don't know simple things like how many buttons are on the shirt they are wearing. You live for everyone, yet you overlook the most important person. Please look at the paper underneath. Wishing you happiness and success. Holding the clock and button, I unfolded a neatly tucked piece of paper and read on, lost in the words about her observations of the lively evenings at my home, the hard work of my mother, and my own busy, thoughtful life. She mentioned how she sees my mother quietly managing, collecting empty cans to trade for lemons, mending clothes, and enduring the heat while I, absorbed in my computer, forget the simpler yet profound aspects of life around me. She saw my mother programming daily meals without a computer and how she dealt with life's daily demands with a smile, which made me realize how much I had been overlooking. 31. A Father's Wish. Lessons in Integrity and Resilience. Dear Principal, please teach my son that not everyone is fair or honest, but let him learn that for every dishonest person we meet, there is an honest one somewhere else. For every selfish politician, a dedicated leader exists. I know these lessons take time, but also teach him that $1 earned from hard work is far more valuable than 5 found on the street. Please teach him how to handle failure and to savor the joy of victory. Teach him to stay away from envy. Show him the secret to enjoying quiet success, and that the biggest bullies are often the easiest to defeat. Help him discover the wondrous world of books and give him time to quietly reflect on life's eternal mysteries. Birds flying across the sky, bees buzzing in the sunlight, and flowers blooming on a green hillside. Help him trust his own ideas even if everyone else thinks he's wrong. Teach him to be kind to the gentle and tough with the rough. Instill in him the strength not to follow the crowd when everyone is chasing the moment. Teach him to listen to everyone, but filter what he hears through a screen of truth, accepting only the good. Teach him to smile through sadness, and that tears are nothing to be ashamed of. Warn him about those who boast and those who use sweet words as a trap. Teach him he can sell his muscle and brain to the highest bidder, but never to sell his heart or soul. Teach him to ignore the shouts of the crowd and to stand firm for what he believes is right. Treat him gently, but do not coddle him, as only the fire of challenge forges true strength. Teach him to always have complete faith in himself, because then he will always have complete faith in humanity. This is a big request, I know, but please try your best, because if you do, my son will truly be a fortunate and happy boy. This rephrased letter maintains the essence of Abraham Lincoln's purported advice, focusing on morals, resilience, and the importance of self-belief. 32. Turning Point. After 25 years of marriage, my spouse and I separated, and he moved out of the house where our daughter was born and grew up. Things seemed simpler since our daughter was already 20, or at least I thought so. She was no longer a teenager, so we didn't need to discuss child care or support. I didn't have to deal with his visits, and there was no need to explain the inexplicable to children. However, I was relieved that things would be simpler for her at her age. She was away at college, an adult not dealing with daily nuisances at home or emotional turmoil from our separation. I tried hard to ensure my own pain didn't affect their relationship. I told them that from that moment on, their relationship had nothing to do with me, and I wouldn't interfere. I tried to act normal when I saw his number on the phone bill from her school, but I must admit I was very upset. At times like these, I trained myself to stay cheerful and calm and to suppress my pain and anger. Over the next few years, I quietly watched my daughter's steps, sometimes wondering if our divorce affected her. What I saw was her strength, independence, confidence, sense of humor, and zest for life. I congratulated myself for handling things well without hurting her. Then, one evening during her Christmas break, with only 6 months until her graduation, we sat in her newly purchased apartment, and she confessed she was dreading the upcoming ceremony. She helped me realize that a parent's divorce impacts children no matter their age or circumstances. Her friends' families would all be attending, with many parties over the week. It saddened her every time she saw me cry after meeting or hearing about her father. She couldn't ask either of us not to come because we both loved her. This made her not want to graduate at all. I felt like I had been dealt a severe blow. I could hardly breathe. Tears streamed down my face. I was shocked at how my own tears of pain had unintentionally scarred her tender heart, and it hurt to know that, because of me, she did not want to embrace a significant milestone in her life. Being straightforward, I gathered all my strength and said, "It's hard to say this." I paused, then continued, "There's only 6 months left until you graduate. Your dad and I both love you very much. We don't want your graduation or any important event in your life to be affected by our issues. I promise I won't cry anymore. We will both try our hardest for you." And we did, with the efforts of both of us, our family, and our friends. Tears were shed on her graduation day, but they were from both of us as we watched her receive her diploma. I realized then that my choice to have that dinner talk with her was worthwhile. By trying to communicate openly with her father, having dinner together, and expressing my thoughts, I had lifted a long-held burden. I realized that forgiveness had deeply permeated my heart, clearing away all the anger and pain. It was indeed a significant turning point, not just for our family of 3, but for our extended family and friends as well. Now, we are busy preparing for another major milestone, her wedding. This fall, my ex-husband and I will once again sit side by side, this time in the front row of the church, likely shedding tears again, but this time out of happiness for our daughter. I remember a teacher I deeply respected once told me, "Forgiveness benefits the forgiver more than the forgiven." And she was absolutely right.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
34. Mother. Throughout my childhood and as I grew up, I always hated my mother, mainly because she had only one eye. Her appearance was a constant source of teasing and ridicule from my classmates. My mom worked as a cook to support my education. One day she came to my school to see me, and it embarrassed me deeply. How could she do this to me? I ignored her, gave her a hateful look, and ran away. The next day, one of my classmates shouted, "Hey, I saw it! Your mom has only one eye!" I felt so ashamed that I wished I could disappear. I just wanted her out of my life. That day, I told her angrily, "You just make me a laughingstock." My mother didn't respond. At that moment, my heart was filled with rage and I didn't care about her feelings. I wanted to escape from home and have nothing to do with her. So, I studied very hard and eventually got a scholarship to study in Singapore. Later, I married, bought a house, and had kids. My wife came from a well-off family, and I hid the truth about my mother, telling her I was an orphan. I was content with my life in Singapore, surrounded by family and material comforts. I bought a small house for my mother and sometimes secretly sent her some money, thinking this fulfilled my duty. I instructed my mother not to contact me. One day, my mother unexpectedly visited. It had been many years since we last met, and she hadn't even seen her grandchildren. When my children saw an old, weary-looking woman at the door, some laughed and others were frightened. I was angry and worried my wife would find out, so I yelled, "How dare you come here and scare my kids? Leave now!" My mother quietly replied, "Oh, sorry, I got the wrong address." And she walked away silently. I didn't contact her for a long time. When I was young, she made me a target of mockery, and now she was disrupting the life I had built. One day I received an invitation to an alumni reunion and lied to my wife saying I had a business trip. After the reunion, out of curiosity more than desire, I visited my mother's house. The neighbors told me that she had passed away a few days earlier and, with no relatives around, the social services had arranged her funeral. I couldn't shed a tear. They handed me a letter she had left for me. "My dearest child, I always thought of you. I'm sorry for showing up in Singapore unannounced and frightening the kids. I was happy to hear you were visiting the old school, but I was too ill to get out of bed to see you. I regret having embarrassed you among your friends all those years you were here. You know, when you were very young, you had an accident and lost an eye. I couldn't bear the thought of you growing up with one eye, so I gave you mine. I sold everything I had so the doctors could perform the eye transplant, and I've never regretted that decision. I am proud of the person you've become, and I take pride in what I was able to do for you. You've seen a whole new world through my eye on my behalf. I love you so much, Mom. 35. The Three Great Teachers. True wisdom is not drawn only from books. Horace. As Hassan, a Muslim sage, was nearing death, someone asked him, "Hassan, who were your teachers?" Hassan replied, "I had countless teachers. If I tried to name them all, it would take months, even years, and I don't have much time left. But I can tell you about three of them. The first was a thief. Once I got lost in the desert and reached a village late at night. Everyone was asleep, but I eventually found a man who was breaking into a house. I asked him where I could stay, and he said, 'It's so late, it's hard to find a place to stay. You can stay with me if you don't mind staying with a thief.' That man was wonderful. I stayed there for a month. Every night he would say, 'I'm off to work. You stay home and pray for me.' When he returned, I would ask, 'Did you steal anything?' And he would always reply, 'Not today, but tomorrow I'll try. It's very possible.' I never saw him in despair. He was always happy. Once, I reflected for many years and didn't grasp any truths. I became so desperate that I thought I should end all these meaningless pursuits. Then, I remembered the thief who nightly insisted, 'Tomorrow, I will succeed. It's very possible.' The second teacher was a dog. When I went to the river to drink, a thirsty dog appeared. It saw its reflection in the water and mistook it for another dog. Frightened, it barked and ran away. But being too thirsty, it returned. Finally, overcoming its fear, it jumped into the river and the reflection disappeared. I realized that humans must overcome their fears through action. The last teacher was a child. I visited a city and saw a child holding a lit candle to place in a temple. I asked the child, "Did you light this candle yourself?" The child replied, "Yes." Then I asked, "The candle was unlit just moments ago, but then it shone brightly. Do you know where the light comes from?" The child laughed loudly, blew out the candle, and said, "You see, the light has disappeared. Now, where do you think it went?" My arrogant self-esteem collapsed, along with my ancient and modern knowledge. At that moment, I realized my own ignorance. Since then, I have discarded all my pride and knowledge. Indeed, it might seem I had no teacher, but that doesn't mean I wasn't a student. I consider everything a teacher. My spirit of inquiry is broader than any individual. I learn from everything, from tree branches to clouds in the sky. I don't have one teacher because I have millions of teachers from whom I've learned whenever possible. The essence of life is always being a student. What does this mean? It means having the ability to learn, always being ready to learn to accept the meanings of everything. The teacher is someone through whom we start learning how to learn. 36. Don't think too highly of yourself. Booth Tarkington was a famous 20th century American writer and playwright, known for his Pulitzer Prize-winning novels The Magnificent Ambersons and Alice Adams. During his heyday, he liked to share the following story. I was at an art exhibition organized by the American Red Cross, attending as a special guest. While I was browsing, two young girls, about 17 or 18 years old, came up to me and sincerely asked for my autograph. "I'm sorry, I don't have a fountain pen with me. Would it be all right if I use a pencil instead?" I knew they wouldn't mind the pencil, but I wanted to show that even as a celebrated author, I remained humble towards my everyday readers. "Of course, that's fine." They happily agreed. Seeing their delighted faces, I felt a great sense of pleasure and pride. One of the girls pulled out a beautiful hardcover notebook with a gold spine and handed it to me. I gracefully wrote a few encouraging words and signed my name. After seeing my signature, one of the girls squinted at me closely and asked, "So, you're not Robert Sherwood?" "Oh no," I proudly responded. "I'm Booth Tarkington, the author of Alice Adams, a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner." The girl then turned to her friend and shrugged. "Mary, can I borrow your eraser for a second?" At that moment, all my pride and self-importance burst like a soap bubble. From then on, I always reminded myself, no matter how talented you are, never think you're too impressive. 37. The Red Mahogany Piano. When I was 20, I worked for a piano store in St. Louis. One day, we received a postcard from Southeast Missouri. It read, "Please bring a red mahogany piano for my granddaughter. I will pay $10 a month with the money I make from selling eggs." The handwriting indicated it was from an elderly woman. She filled every inch of that postcard, repeating her request even on the margins. Our company couldn't offer a piano for just $10 a month, so we ignored the postcard. However, eventually more people from that area bought pianos, and we had to make a delivery there. Out of curiosity, I visited the elderly woman's address. It was exactly as I imagined. She lived in a shabby shack beside a field. The shack's floor was dirty. Chickens ran everywhere. There was no car, no phone, no job, nothing but a roof, and not a good one at that. Her granddaughter, about 10 years old, was barefoot and wore a patched dress. I explained to the old woman that we were sorry but couldn't help her. However, she didn't seem to understand because every 6 weeks, like clockwork, we received the same postcard. After 2 years, I started my own piano company and sometimes advertised in the local Missouri paper. I began receiving similar postcards, which I also ignored, knowing it was futile. But one day, we got some new pianos, including a red mahogany one. Despite knowing it could be a loss for the company, I decided to deliver it to the elderly woman. I told her she would have to make 52 payments of $10 each. I placed the piano where it was least likely to leak and told her and the girl to keep the chickens off it. Then I left, sure that I'd essentially given the piano away for free. However, the $10 payments came regularly every month, all 52 of them. Sometimes they weren't just paper money, but coins taped to a postcard. After receiving all the payments, I had no contact with the old woman for 20 years. Until one day, while on a business trip in Memphis, I stopped at a restaurant and heard the best piano playing I'd ever heard, played by a very beautiful woman. I approached her after she finished playing. We talked, and incredibly, it was the same girl from the shack 20 years ago. She told me that since her grandmother bought her the red mahogany piano, she had won several music awards at school and locally. Now she had a family, but her grandmother had passed away. I asked if she knew what that red mahogany piano meant. She said she was too young to understand much then, but I did. Finally, I told her, "I'm really glad to have met you again, but now I must go." And I really had to go because, men never want to be seen crying in public. 38. How to be happy. Often, after experiencing countless hardships in life, we find ourselves asking where happiness is, why we can't find it despite constantly searching. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh offers us a perspective on happiness as follows. We all have ideas of what happiness should be. We think happiness has to be this way or that, and if it's not, we conclude we're not happy. This way, we're trapped by our own notions of happiness, which can often hinder us from achieving it. For example, if we believe we need a certain degree to be happy and think we'll never be happy without it, we're stuck in a happiness trap, even though there are many opportunities to be happy. We lose out because we box our happiness into that one idea of getting the degree. It's a kind of desire, a craving for that degree. I once heard a guy say, My life's happiness is to marry this girl, and if I can't, I'd rather die because happiness would be impossible. This shows he tied his whole life to the notion of marrying her, and without that, life would lose all meaning. What binds us are these notions, in Buddhism called delusions. Delusions about happiness, wanting countless conditions to be met to feel happy. In many teachings, the Buddha said, "The past has gone, the future is not yet here. There is only one moment for us to live, and that is the present moment. We should not seek happiness in the future. By bringing our mindfulness to the present, we will see that we have more than enough conditions to be happy right now and here." Once, a merchant and hundreds of others came to see the Buddha. On that day, the Buddha spoke to them about the joy of being in the present moment. He knew these merchants were too focused on future achievements. They didn't take time for themselves or their loved ones. So, Buddha taught them, do not seek happiness in the future. Happiness is available to you right here and now. The present is beautiful. The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived yet. We only truly live in the present moment. If we live deeply, we can appreciate the blue sky, white clouds, birds singing, trees rustling, flowers blooming. These are the wonders of life. A clear glass of water is a wonder. Can we stay in the present moment to connect with it, or are we thinking about a future project while drinking it? Being in the present is the art of living happily. If we are happy now, surely the future will be happy. If there's no happiness in the present, there won't be any in the future either. Suppose you rush through washing dishes to grab a cup of tea for happiness. Then, when holding the tea, you rush towards the future, forgetting about the tea in your hands. Live peacefully in the present. True happiness is simply peace of mind.
If you like this video, please comment 1. And if you don't, comment 2. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.
39. When parents split up. Kids say that if you hug a picture of someone you miss and go to sleep, you'll dream of them. But Mom, why is it that I do this every night, yet I never see you in my dreams? My wife passed away unexpectedly 4 years ago. Unable to care for my parents, I've been feeling down and exhausted. One evening, I came home too tired to eat or chat much. I took off my suit and went straight to bed. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. A bowl of instant noodles had spilled all over the bed because there was a bowl hidden under the blankets. That little rascal! I grabbed a clothes hanger and ran outside to discipline my son, who was sitting and playing. Tears streaming down his face, my son said, "I ate all my breakfast, and by evening I was so hungry because you weren't home yet. I found some instant noodles in the kitchen cupboard. I wanted to cook them, but you told me not to use the gas stove on my own, so I used hot water from the shower instead. I made one bowl for myself and left one for you under the blankets to keep it warm until you came home. I got distracted playing with a toy I borrowed from a friend and forgot to tell you." I didn't want my son to see me cry, so I rushed to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and wept. After composing myself, I opened my son's room door and saw him in his pajamas, tears in his eyes, holding a picture of his mother. From that day on, I took better care of him, especially when he started first grade. Once his teacher called to say he hadn't come to school. I took the day off to look for him and finally found him in a stationery store standing in front of an electronic toy. Angry, I scolded him, but he just said, "I'm sorry." A year later, I got a call from the post office saying my son had dropped a bunch of unaddressed letters into a mailbox during their busiest season, causing them trouble. I went there, brought the letters home, and confronted him. "Why would you do something like this?" Through tears, he replied, "These are letters I wrote to Mom." His words made my eyes tear up, and I asked, "Why did you send so many at once?" He said, "When I was shorter, I couldn't reach the mailbox. Now that I'm taller, I wanted to send all the letters I wrote before." After a pause, I told him, Mom is in heaven now. After you finish writing a letter, burn it, and it will reach her. When he fell asleep, I read the letters to see what he wanted to tell his mom. One of them moved me deeply. Dear Mom, I miss you so much. Today at school, there was a performance I was supposed to do with you, but since you weren't there, I didn't participate. I didn't tell Dad because I didn't want him to miss you too. He searched everywhere for me, but I stood in front of an electronic toy so he wouldn't see how sad I was. Even though Dad scolded me, I didn't explain why. Mom, every day I see Dad looking at your picture for a long time. I think he misses you as much as I do. Mom, I'm starting to forget your voice. Can you come to my dreams just once so I can see your face and hear your voice? After reading the letter, I broke down in tears and couldn't stop blaming myself. How can I fill the void that my wife left behind? We, as parents, have a tremendous responsibility because we chose to bring a child into this world. As a mother, don't work too much overtime. As a father, don't drink too much and don't smoke. Take good care of yourself so you can love your child wholeheartedly. Don't destroy your health trying to make more money, because what's the point of wealth without health? And don't think waiting until you have more money will make things better. You never know what might happen next. Parents, please don't let small issues lead to divorce. The greatest pain from a breakup is not yours alone. It deeply affects your child. Whether you're married or not, remember to cherish what you have. 40. Moral values and their expression in society. When criticizing Dühring's idea of an eternal and unchanging moral doctrine applicable to all historical periods and nations, Friedrich Engels asserted, ultimately, all moral doctrines that have existed to date are products of the economic conditions of their society. In a class-based society, morals reflect class interests. Each class has its own morals, which reflect the practical relationships forming the basis of their class position, namely the economic relations in which production and exchange occur. According to Engels, so far, there is no true morality, if by that we mean in the absolute final sense of the word. However, Engels did not deny the value of moral doctrines for social development. He believed that, like all other fields of human knowledge, there is undeniable progress in morals, and the morality now representing the overthrow of the present, serving the interests of the future, namely proletarian morality, is the morality with the greatest number, but promises a long-lasting existence. Thus, the progression of morality is due to the evolving moral values throughout history. Among the theories of morality, some are relevant only at a particular time to promote social progress, while others may have long-term value for society's development. What are moral values? Based on what criteria do we assess moral values? As we know, morality, as a form of social consciousness, can be seen as a collection of concepts about good and evil, right and wrong, conscience, responsibility, happiness, justice, and about the rules that evaluate and regulate behavior between individuals and society, and among individuals within society. In a class-based society, the dominant moral ideas are those of the economically dominant class. This class uses the state apparatus to propagate, educate, and institutionalize its moral ideas into standard moral principles, turning them into measures for evaluating and regulating the behavior of individuals in society, aligning with its interests. Value, in the broadest sense, can be understood as something that makes an object useful, meaningful, and valuable to a subject, recognized by everyone. Values can be divided into material values, spiritual values, personal values, common values, social values. Some believe that value is inherent in the object, but each subject can evaluate it from different perspectives, leading to different concepts of value. However, we believe that value refers to what is universally recognized, aligning with societal interests. Nonetheless, value is also a historically contingent category. From these concepts, we can understand moral values as those chosen and assessed by people as meaningful actions for societal life, supported by conscience and public endorsement. The objective standard of moral values is social benefit, hence principles and norms of morality that align with societal interests and are supported by public opinion are considered valuable. Thus, moral value is determined by its alignment with the requirements of social progress. But the social benefit and the requirements of social progress are historical, meaning each stage of social development has its own requirements for benefit and progress. Thus, moral values are also historical. Engels mentioned that the moral commandment, "do not steal," only has value in societies with private property ownership. In a society where all motivations for theft are removed, making theft almost exclusively an act of the mentally ill, anyone solemnly proclaiming the eternal truth of "do not steal" would be ridiculed. Moral values are expressed through the functions of morality. At any stage of social development, morality has the following basic functions. First, the function of regulating behavior. This regulation is done primarily through public opinion, praising good and condemning evil. In this case, the value of morality depends on the strength and correctness of public opinion. Whenever public opinion is reinforced and evolves with universal support, it becomes a powerful force in regulating morality. Our people say, "Stone tablets may wear away in 100 years, but the tablet of public opinion remains visible forever." Indeed, the tablet of public opinion has been passed down for thousands of years, becoming a powerful tool in regulating moral behavior. If public opinion is guided by advanced moral doctrines, it contributes to regulating moral behavior, making it compatible with social progress and creating true moral values. The second way involves individuals voluntarily regulating their behavior according to societal moral standards. This depends on the education and enlightenment of the moral subject. In moral relations, the moral subject participates in the behavior and judges their own actions. When acting, the moral subject relies on the standards formed within themselves. These standards have absorbed societal moral norms and are shaped by their living conditions and specific social relations. If these standards align with societal moral norms, they become an objective basis, making the individual's moral behavior compatible with societal interests, supported by public opinion. Conversely, when personal standards deviate from societal norms, it leads to moral behavior that does not align with societal interests, leading to public criticism. When judging their own behavior, the moral subject relies on their personal moral standards. If due to lack of enthusiasm or effort they fail to meet a moral relationship as per their own standards, their conscience is troubled, and they feel regret and shame about their behavior. Conversely, when they act according to their standards, their conscience is clear, and they feel proud of their behavior. Thus, in this way of regulation, the value of morality depends on the moral standards formed within each moral subject, forming the basis for each individual's moral behavior to align with societal interest and progress. Second, the function of education. The educational function is carried out through societal education and individual self-education. Moral education is the process of propagating societal moral ideas and standards, turning them into measures for evaluating and regulating individual behavior to achieve alignment between individual behavior and societal interests. During their daily activities, individuals not only pursue material and spiritual benefits, but also personal advancement and societal acclaim. Therefore, Societal moral ideas and standards become goals and directions for individual activities. Repeated moral behaviors form relatively stable moral relationships and are consistently maintained and reinforced by public opinion, becoming habits, customs, and moral traditions that directly influence the formation of the next generation's morality. Thus, the value of morality in this case depends on the correctness and scientific nature of the ideas and standards of morality propagated and educated in society. Individual moral self-education primarily involves individuals using their conscience to judge their behavior to reinforce their personal moral standards, achieving behavior that aligns with these standards. Additionally, based on public opinion, they adjust their behavior and even their personal moral standards when they notice deviations from societal norms. The value of morality in this case depends on the sensitivity and willingness of the subject to cultivate and train their morality to align with societal ideas and standards. Third, the function of cognition. Whether societal moral ideas and standards become moral relationships in societal life depends not only on the correctness and moral ideas of the standards, on societal propagation and education, but also significantly on the ability of each moral subject to receive and transform them in their cognitive activities and behavior. Through choice and assessment, moral subjects form beliefs, moral ideals and principles and standards in their own behavior. Moral cognition includes two levels: emotional and moral cognition, and experience and theoretical moral cognition. Moral cognition at the level of experience or emotional morality is closely linked with practical activity, with societal moral relationships, and is always influenced by public opinion, customs, and moral traditions. This process forms within the moral subject, and the images, the idols, become direct standards for evaluating and regulating their moral behavior. For example, a child often learns by observing their parents' behavior with friends, family members, and at work, and will likely emulate what their parents have done before. Moral cognition at the level of theoretical or logical thinking is principled cognition directed by the basic interests of the class or society. Through the process of cognition as well as practical activity, the moral subject analyzes, evaluates, and selects societal moral ideas and standards to thereby prove and explain that the moral ideas and standards formed within themselves are correct and reasonable, to absorb the correct and reasonable aspects and criticize the mistakes in other ideas and standards. Thus, it can be said that the value of morality formed in each individual always depends on their education and reception of the correct and reasonable moral ideas and standards of society.
Hey everyone, your comments truly matter, offering insights and motivation to others and uplifting our creative team at Lighthouse of Wisdom channel. Sharing your thoughts and experiences enriches our community. So, let's get the conversation started below and help illuminate our path with your wisdom.